Arya stands by the window, staring out at the sprawling city skyline, the weight of the decision beginning to settle on her. She glances down at her phone again, scrolling through the news article about homelessness, her fingers lightly tapping the screen as if contemplating. Arya, whispering to herself, I could make a real difference. She walks toward a sleek desk, the high-tech surface reflecting her face, and picks up the phone again. With a determined breath, she opens a new message to a charity organization. Text. What would it take to build a sustainable shelter for the homeless in our city? Arya hits send, her hand trembling slightly with excitement. She takes a deep breath, pacing around the room as she waits for a reply. The phone buzzes. A response. Text. We're very interested in your vision. Could we meet to discuss? Arya's eyes light up. She quickly types back. Text. Yes. Let's make this happen. She puts the phone down and stands still for a moment, her mind racing with possibilities. But as she begins to pace again, a thought strikes her. Arya. To herself. I don't need to wait. I could start today. She walks over to a luxurious chest of drawers and opens it, pulling out a pristine leather wallet. She flips it open and, with a single motion, takes out several stacks of cash. Her fingers hover over it for a moment before she decisively slides it back in. She turns back to the living room, where a large art piece catches her attention, a piece she no longer feels connected to. Her gaze softens, but then she squares her shoulders and grabs her jacket off the back of the couch. Arya. To herself, with newfound resolve. Time to get to work. She exits the penthouse, her steps full of purpose. Arya walks briskly down the bustling city streets, a stark contrast to her usual leisurely pace. She passes a homeless shelter, its entrance crowded with people. A woman with a child sits against the wall, the child asleep in her lap. Arya's gaze softens as she stops for a moment. Arya. To herself. This isn't enough. She pulls her phone from her bag and opens the charity message once more. Text. I want to meet today. I'll come to your office. She hits send with a quick flick of her thumb and then strides forward with renewed confidence. The office is located in a modest building, a stark contrast to the penthouse Arya just left behind. Arya steps inside, greeted by the sounds of a phone ringing and a receptionist directing her to a small conference room. Arya sits across from Marcus, 40s, a seasoned social worker with a no-nonsense attitude. He reviews the documents in front of him, then looks up with a skeptical but intrigued expression. Marcus, you're serious about this, aren't you? Arya. Nodding with determination. I've got the resources, the will. I want to do something that matters. Marcus. Leaning back in his chair. It's not just about throwing money at the problem. It's about sustainability, long-term change. Are you prepared for that kind of challenge? Arya pauses for a moment, reflecting on the question. Then, with a sense of clarity, she answers. Arya. Yes. I want to build something lasting. Something that gives these people the tools to rebuild their lives. Marcus nods slowly, clearly impressed. Marcus. I think we can work with that. Let's figure out how to make it happen. Arya smiles, a sense of purpose growing stronger within her. Arya. Let's get started. Weeks have passed. Arya now walks through a bustling city park, where volunteers distribute food, clothes, and blankets to those in need. She's changed, more grounded, more compassionate. She hands a bag of clothes to a homeless man, and their eyes meet with a shared understanding. She walks away, her heart full. Arya. To herself. This is only the beginning. She glances up at the city lights, the skyline now looking different to her, like a place where real change could happen, one step at a time. Arya sits at her sleek desk, the glow of her laptop casting a soft light on her focused expression. She reviews blueprints for a new shelter project that will provide not just a place to stay, but also job training, therapy, and life skills workshops. The room is quiet, except for the soft clicking of keys as she types an email to potential investors. The doorbell rings. Arya hesitates for a moment, then walks over to open it. Standing in the doorway is Rachel, 30s, a social worker from the organization she's partnered with. She's dressed casually, with a backpack slung over her shoulder, her eyes bright but tired. Rachel. Smiling. I thought we could go over the plans together. Thought it might be easier if we talked it through in person. Arya. nodding, stepping aside to let her in. I was just going over the layout for the new shelter. I've been thinking about adding a community garden. Something that could help the residents feel more in control of their space. Rachel raises an eyebrow, clearly impressed. Rachel, a garden? I like that idea. It could give them something to care for, a little peace in all the chaos. How's the fundraising going? Arya pauses, the slight worry in her eyes betraying the confidence in her voice. Arya, it's been a slow start. Some people are hesitant, and the higher-ups, well, they're more interested in profits than in actual change. Rachel, nodding in understanding. That's how it goes. But if anyone can get through to them, it's you. Arya smiles faintly, but her mind is already working through the problem. She stands and grabs a few papers off her desk. Arya, I'm thinking we need to present it differently. Not just as a charity project, but as an investment in the future. If we can prove the shelter helps reduce homelessness in the long term, saves the city money on emergency services, and creates a healthier community, I think we can sway some of the bigger donors. Rachel, smiling. You've definitely got the right approach. They sit at the table, unpacking the details of the project, discussing logistics, funding strategies, and what partnerships they'll need to make it work. As the night drags on, Arya grows more energized, the weight of the task becoming less daunting as they formulate a plan. Arya pulls up to a sleek, upscale restaurant in her car. She's meeting with Lucas, late 30s, a wealthy businessman she's been courting for investment. He's known for his corporate success, but has a reputation for being somewhat cold and calculated. Arya walks through the door, her heels clicking on the polished floor, and is greeted by the host. Host. Right this way, Miss Arya. She's led to a quiet corner where Lucas is already seated, a glass of wine in front of him. He stands when she approaches, offering a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Lucas, smiling tightly. Arya, always a pleasure. Arya, smiling back, sitting down. Likewise. I trust everything's going well on your end? Lucas, business is thriving. You know how it is. They sit in silence for a moment as the waiter pours wine. Arya takes a deep breath, then leans in slightly, her voice calm but firm. Arya, I wanted to talk to you about something different today. Not business, but something important. Something that could change lives. Lucas raises an eyebrow, intrigued but guarded. Lucas, go on. Arya, I'm investing in a project for the homeless. Not just temporary shelters. We're building a sustainable community that will help people rebuild their lives. We're going to offer job training, therapy, mental health services. We're going to change the system. Lucas takes a slow sip of his wine, watching her intently. Lucas, after a pause. It sounds noble, but it also sounds expensive. What makes you think it'll work? Arya, leaning in, meeting his gaze. Because it's not just about money. It's about showing people they're worth more than what society tells them they are. And, if we do this right, it'll save the city a fortune in the long run. Not to mention the publicity. You'll be associated with one of the most innovative and impactful projects the city has ever seen. Lucas sits back, considering her words. He places his glass down, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Lucas, I'm listening. Tell me more. The next day, Arya walks into the charity's office, a large envelope in hand. She meets with Marcus and Rachel, excitement bubbling in her as she sets the envelope down on the table. Arya, grinning. I've got our first major investor. Rachel and Marcus exchange surprised glances before looking back at Arya. Marcus, you did it. Who? Arya. Lucas King. I'm meeting with him next week to finalize everything. Rachel lets out a breath, clearly impressed. Rachel, you're really doing it, huh? This is huge. Arya, nodding, her eyes filled with determination. It's just the beginning. We're not stopping until this city has a real solution for homelessness. She leans forward, a spark of excitement in her eyes. Arya, we're going to change everything. Jack pauses, then laughs bitterly. Help. People like you always think they can help, but they never stay long enough to really see what it's like. You have no idea what it's like to sleep in the cold, with nothing but the clothes on your back. Arya takes a deep breath, looks at him earnestly. I get it. I don't know what it's like, but I want to try. You've been out here a while. Have you ever thought about getting off the streets? Getting some help? I can help you with that. Jack shifts uncomfortably, glancing at the people bustling around them, oblivious to his presence. Jack scoffs. You think it's that easy? That I just need some help and everything changes? I've tried, lady. I've been through the shelters, the systems. They don't care. They just shuffle you around like cattle. Nobody really listens. Arya, sitting down beside him, not intimidated by his bitterness. So, you've been let down. I get it. But maybe it's not about them. Maybe it's about you deciding that you deserve better. Jack glances at her, studying her carefully. You think I don't know what I deserve? I had a life once. A family, a house, a job. I had everything. Until... pauses, shaking his head. Until everything slipped through my fingers. People like me don't come back from that. Arya, softly. Maybe you didn't come back because no one ever really gave you a chance. I'm not offering you a quick fix. I'm offering you a chance to rebuild, if you want it. Jack looks down at his sign, his fingers tracing the cardboard absently. The noise of the street fades into the background as he considers her words. Jack, muttering, almost to himself, I don't even know where to start. Arya smiles gently. That's where I come in. You don't have to do it alone. But you have to be willing to try. Jack, measuring her with his eyes, still uncertain. And what's in it for you, huh? Why do you care? Arya pauses for a moment, looking him in the eyes. Because I can't stand to see someone like you give up. And honestly, because I'm tired of living a life where I don't even know who the people around me are. I want to be part of something real. Jack looks at her, really looks at her for the first time. The woman standing before him isn't the typical passerby, not the kind who throws some spare change his way and hurries off. She's offering something deeper. Jack, gruffly, it's not going to be easy. Arya, I know, but we can take it one step at a time. There's a long pause, then Jack slowly nods, as if the weight of the decision has just hit him. He looks down at his worn hands, then back at Arya. Jack, all right, one step. But don't think I'm going to change overnight. Arya, smiling softly. I wouldn't expect that. Arya stands up, extending a hand toward him. For a moment, Jack hesitates, but then, after a long pause, he accepts it. The two of them stand there, a new, unspoken understanding between them. Arya, we'll figure it out. Together. Jack, looking down at her hand, then back up at her, uncertain. You really think this is gonna make a difference? Arya, with quiet conviction. I don't know. But I won't know unless we try. Jack hesitates for a moment, then lets out a sigh, the weight of years of disappointment and loneliness pressing down on him. He clasps her hand briefly but firmly, a small step, a small promise. Jack, all right, let's try. Arya smiles, a genuine warmth in her expression, before stepping back slightly. Arya, good. First step, let's get you somewhere warm. A hot meal. Something to drink. You haven't eaten all day, have you? Jack chuckles darkly. Has it ever been about food? Arya, gently, as she begins walking alongside him. It's always about food. But it's also about something else. About not having to go to bed hungry or cold. Jack, glancing at her. You ever feel like you're just playing at life? Like you're pretending to be something you're not? You know, just getting through it all? Arya pauses for a second, thinking. I used to. I think that's why I'm here now. Trying to stop pretending. Jack stops in his tracks for a moment, looking at her in surprise. Jack, quietly. You pretending? Arya, with a soft laugh. Yeah. Just like everyone else. I've spent most of my life trying to meet expectations, my parents, society's. But none of it really made me happy. They resume walking, Arya's words hanging in the air. Jack, gruffly. Guess we're all just playing parts then. Arya, nodding. I think we're all just trying to figure out what part we're supposed to play. Or maybe we're supposed to make our own. They walk a little further, and Arya leads him to a small, quiet cafe on the corner. It's warm inside, the smell of fresh coffee and baked bread filling the air. She pulls open the door for Jack, who steps inside slowly, taking in the unexpected luxury of warmth. Arya, smiling to the waitress as they enter. 2 coffees, please. Whatever he wants. The waitress nods, taking the order before heading off. Jack looks at Arya, still skeptical but now beginning to show signs of curiosity. Jack, quietly. You really think you can fix me, huh? Arya, smiling softly, a twinkle in her eyes. I'm not trying to fix you. I'm just trying to make sure you don't have to stay broken. Jack, gruffly, taking a sip. I haven't had a good cup of coffee in years. Arya, taking a sip of her own drink. Well, now you have one. There's a silence between them, but it's not uncomfortable. Arya watches Jack, seeing him let down his guard just a little. Jack, after a long pause, looking up at her. Why are you doing this? Why me? Arya, thoughtfully, setting her cup down. Because I think there's something in you worth saving. You might not see it right now, but I do. Everyone deserves a shot at something better, even if they don't know they want it yet. Jack looks down at his coffee, stirring it absently. A quiet sadness lingers in his eyes, but there's also something else, something tentative, like a spark he's not sure he's ready to acknowledge. Jack, softly. You know, you're different than I thought. People like you don't usually stick around. Arya, smiling gently. Maybe I'm tired of being like everyone else. They sit in silence for a few moments, both lost in their thoughts, the world outside continuing on without noticing the quiet connection blossoming between them. Finally, Jack sets his mug down and looks at Arya with something resembling resolve in his eyes. Jack, gruffly. All right. What now? Arya, with a small grin. Now we figure out the next step. Together. Jack, leaning back in his chair, his hands clasped together. You think a couple $100 and a nice place to sleep is enough to make me spill my life story? You're not exactly making it sound enticing. Arya, softly, trying to bridge the gap. It's not just about the money, Jack. It's about understanding. Real understanding. You can't put a price on that. She watches him carefully, waiting for a reaction. Jack lets out a slow breath, eyeing her with both suspicion and a flicker of curiosity. Jack, shrugging. Understanding. Yeah, that's the word. Maybe you should try talking to someone who's been in the same shoes you have. Real life. You won't like it. Arya, nodding slowly. I know my life's been different. I don't have to tell you that. But maybe I'm tired of pretending. I want something raw, genuine. She leans in slightly, her eyes locking onto his, trying to convey sincerity. Arya, I want to know what it's like to be you. To see what shapes a person like you. The grit, the resilience, the pain. Jack laughs again, this time more lightly. You sure you can handle that? It's not exactly a fairy tale. It's not some movie script where everything gets wrapped up in a neat little bow. Arya hesitates, but there's no backing down now. She's already made her decision. Arya, I'm not looking for a fairy tale. I'm just looking for something real. The room feels tense for a moment, as if the weight of their words is settling in. Jack finally breaks the silence, his voice quieter, almost introspective. Jack pauses, then speaks with a trace of vulnerability. All right. You wanna understand? Let's start with the basics, then. He leans forward, eyes not meeting hers for a second, and begins to speak in a low tone. Jack, you ever been cold? Not just cold like it's winter, but really cold? The kind that bites into your bones, makes your skin numb, and doesn't let up for days? Arya listens intently, the image he paints vivid and raw in her mind. Jack, that's where it starts. When you're living on the edge. Everything you own is a burden. Everything you don't have is what keeps you up at night. Arya, her voice soft, almost unsure. How do you survive? Jack, smirking lightly. You don't. Not really. But you keep going anyway. And you learn that the only thing you can count on is yourself. Everything else, it's temporary. Arya absorbs his words, her face betraying a mixture of empathy and confusion. She had always been wrapped in luxury, in control of her environment. This felt like another world altogether. Arya pauses. That sounds exhausting.
Jack,
It is. But what else is there to do? You either let it eat you alive or you fight back. Every single day. They sit in silence for a moment, the air thick with unspoken understanding. Arya's mind races with what she's just heard, the weight of Jack's words settling in her chest.
Arya,
After a beat. Tell me more. What do you fight for? Jack takes a deep breath, as though he's gathering the courage to open up even more, but then his eyes flick to the side, distant, like he's retreating back into a memory.
Jack,
Quietly. I fight for the ones who can't anymore. For the ones who didn't make it. That's who I fight for. You'd never understand what that's like. Arya feels the tension in his voice. There's a weight in his words, and for a moment, she feels an overwhelming sense of guilt for ever thinking she could just pay him to share his life.
Arya,
Gently. Maybe I don't understand. But I want to. Jack looks at her, his eyes searching hers for something, some glimmer of truth. Maybe it's the sincerity he's been looking for. Or maybe, for just a moment, he sees a kindred spirit in her.
Jack,
Softly. You're crazy, you know that?
Arya,
Smiling lightly, trying to lighten the mood. I've heard worse.
Jack,
Smirking back. Well, I'll give you this. You've got guts. You're not like the usual crowd who just tosses money at me and expects me to entertain them. There's a brief pause as Jack takes in the quiet tension between them.
Jack,
All right, Arya. 1 week. But don't think you'll get any easy answers. You asked for this. You're gonna see things that'll shake you. Arya nods, resolute. This was her choice, and she wasn't backing down.
Arya,
I'm ready. The next day, Arya follows Jack through the gritty streets of the city, the stark contrast to her usual world more jarring with each step. The sleek, polished buildings of her life seem like a distant memory now. Her heels click sharply against the cracked sidewalk, but she keeps pace with Jack, who walks with the ease of someone who's spent years navigating these streets. His movements are fluid, like he belongs here in a way she never will.
Arya,
Hesitant, trying to keep the conversation flowing. How do you keep going? Every day. With everything? Jack glances over at her, his eyes hard, but there's a flicker of something softer there, maybe amusement, maybe pity. It's hard to tell.
Jack,
You keep going because if you stop, the world doesn't wait for you. You don't get the luxury of pausing. If you want to survive, you move forward. Doesn't matter how much it hurts.
Arya,
Softly, almost to herself. It's like you're invisible to everyone. Jack doesn't respond immediately. They pass a man sitting against a wall, his hand outstretched. Arya instinctively reaches into her bag, pulling out a few bills. She's about to hand them to him when Jack grabs her wrist, stopping her.
Jack,
Low, firm. Don't. Arya blinks, confused. She looks from the man to Jack, then back again.
Arya,
But he needs help.
Jack,
Sighs, his voice sharp but not unkind. That's not help, Arya. That's pity. And pity won't change a damn thing. You're not saving anyone by throwing money at them. This life, it doesn't work like that. Arya lets her hand fall back to her side, the bills still clutched between her fingers. She looks at Jack, seeing the hardness in his expression, but also something deeper, a tiredness, a cynicism that's been carved into him over the years.
Arya,
Quietly. So, what do we do then? Just walk away?
Jack,
With a wry smile. In a way. You gotta know when to step in and when to let go. We all have our battles, Arya. Can't fight every fight. They continue walking in silence, the city's noise drowning out their thoughts. But Arya's mind is racing. She's struggling to keep up, not just physically but emotionally. The world Jack lives in is so much harsher than she ever imagined. Hours later, they reach an old building in a part of town that Arya knows is far from her comfort zone. It's a crumbling structure, graffiti-covered walls, the stench of decay in the air. But there's something oddly inviting about it to Jack. He gestures for Arya to follow him inside.
Jack,
This is where I stay. It's not much, but it's home. Inside, the place is a stark contrast to the luxurious penthouse Arya is used to. It's small, dimly lit, with peeling paint on the walls and minimal furniture. A single bed, a chair, a small table with a half-eaten meal on it. The atmosphere feels heavy, like it's soaked in history and struggle. It's not pretty, but it's real. Arya steps inside, feeling the weight of the room settle over her. She's not sure what she expected, but it wasn't this rawness, this feeling of being in the heart of a life she knows so little about.
Arya.
Glancing around, trying to steady her breath. This is your place?
Jack.
Shrugging, as if it's nothing.
Yeah.
It's not glamorous, but it's all I need. There's a roof over my head, and that's enough. Arya looks at the bed, noticing the worn-out sheets, the empty beer cans scattered on the floor. She tries to imagine what it would be like to live here day after day, in this space with so little. It's both humbling and overwhelming.
Arya.
Softly, almost afraid to ask. How do you sleep here? Jack looks at her, his eyes unreadable, before he walks over to the small window, peering out at the dimly lit street below.
Jack.
You get used to it. You stop noticing the things you can't change. You focus on the things you can. Arya watches him, her heart aching with the weight of everything he's been through. She realizes that this is what she wanted to see, the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, how painful. But the reality of it is more than she bargained for.
Arya.
Quietly, almost to herself. I don't know if I can understand this. Jack turns back to her, his expression softer now, but still distant.
Jack.
Gruffly. You don't have to. No one's asking you to. He pauses, watching her for a moment before continuing.
Jack.
But if you really want to understand, you need to stop thinking you can fix things. You can't. People like me, we don't need fixing. We just need to be seen. Arya stands there, the weight of his words sinking in. She doesn't know what she was expecting from this week, maybe some deep revelation, some grand epiphany. But what she's discovering instead is something much harder to swallow. The truth of a life lived in survival, in constant battle with a world that doesn't care. Jack looks at her one last time, a flicker of something in his eyes, maybe recognition, maybe pity. It's hard to tell. But whatever it is, it stirs something in her, deep inside.
Jack.
Gruffly. You can stay here if you want. But if you really want to understand, you'll have to do more than just watch. You'll have to feel it. Arya nods, the weight of his words settling in her chest. For the first time, she realizes that understanding might be more than she bargained for. But she's already too far in to turn back now.
Arya.
Softly. I'm ready. And with that, the door to a world she never imagined opens just a little wider. They continue walking, the world moving around them, but their bubble of discomfort makes everything feel distant. The bustling city is a cacophony of honking cars, street vendors shouting, and the murmurs of everyday life, yet Arya and Jack move through it in a strange silence. Arya shifts uncomfortably, glancing at Jack, who keeps his eyes forward, lost in his thoughts. She opens her mouth to speak, then hesitates, choosing her words carefully.
Arya.
Softly. I didn't mean for it to be like this. I just wanted things to feel normal.
Jack.
Without looking at her. Normal? Is there such a thing when you're hiding everything? Hiding who you really are? Arya flinches again, the words cutting deeper this time. She had tried to convince herself that she could escape, at least for a little while. But Jack, blunt as always, had a way of pulling her back to reality. The reality she had been avoiding for so long.
Arya.
I just wanted a break. A chance to feel like I'm not defined by everything.
Jack.
Pauses, then sighs. You think this disguise is enough to make you feel free? You can't outrun it, Arya. Not for long. Sooner or later, the truth is going to catch up to you. She stops walking, her heart beating faster now, anxiety starting to take hold. She watches as a few people pass by, their eyes flicking over her briefly, some with curiosity, some with judgment, but all of them unaware of who she truly is.
Arya.
Desperate. I'm not ready to face it yet. Not today. She turns away, pulling her coat tighter around her, wishing for some kind of protection against the world, against her own choices.
Jack.
Pauses, then softly. We don't always get to choose when we're ready, Arya. Life doesn't wait. Arya swallows hard, trying to push down the knot in her throat. She starts walking again, faster this time, as if running from the words he said. Jack watches her, his expression unreadable, torn between wanting to say something more and letting her have her space.
Arya.
Mumbling as she walks ahead. Let's just get out of here. Jack doesn't move at first, still processing what's been said. Then, with a deep breath, he follows her, the weight of their shared silence hanging over them like a cloud. Jack stands a few feet away, watching her, wondering if anything he says will make a difference. The wind picks up, a cold reminder of the world outside their bubble.
Jack.
After a long pause. You know, you don't have to do this alone. Arya doesn't respond at first, her gaze fixed on the distant skyline.
Arya.
Barely above a whisper. I don't even know what it means anymore. To not be alone. Jack takes a step forward, his voice quieter now, more genuine.
Jack.
It doesn't mean running away. It means letting someone in, even if it scares you. Arya's eyes flick to him, and for the first time in a while, she lets herself feel the weight of what he's saying. She doesn't respond immediately, but there's a softness in her eyes now, a glimpse of the person she's trying so hard to hide. Arya sits with her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, staring out at the trees, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. The park, usually a refuge for the busy city, feels eerily calm in this moment. The air is crisp, and the faint sound of children laughing in the distance adds an unsettling contrast to the tension between her and Jack. Jack sits beside her, not too close but not far enough to feel like a stranger. He looks at her, the hint of concern still present in his eyes. His words seem to hang in the air, but she hasn't replied yet. He's beginning to wonder if she ever will.
Jack.
Tentatively, breaking the silence. You know, when you said you wanted a break, I think I understand what you meant. It's not just about running from your life. It's about wanting something real for once. Something that doesn't come with strings attached. Arya turns her head slightly toward him, her eyes still clouded with uncertainty, but she listens. The weight of his words seems to break through her wall, just a little.
Arya.
Quietly. I've been living a lie for so long. The whole world sees me one way, but it's not who I am. I don't even know who I am anymore. Her voice cracks, and for a split second, it's as if the weight of all her decisions comes crashing down on her all at once. She's been pretending for so long that it's starting to feel impossible to go back. The mask she's been wearing is suffocating. Jack doesn't speak at first. He simply watches her, his expression softer than before, his frustration replaced by understanding.
Jack.
After a beat. Maybe you don't have to have all the answers right now. You don't have to know who you are today. But you don't have to keep pretending either. Whatever it is, you can face it. We can face it. Arya's eyes flick to his for a moment, almost surprised by his words. She hasn't expected him to understand, let alone offer comfort. But there's something in his tone that makes her want to believe him. The moment is interrupted by the sound of a phone ringing. Arya's hand instinctively reaches into her pocket, her expression faltering for a moment as she sees the caller ID.
Arya.
Sighs, muttering, "It's my father." Jack raises an eyebrow, though he doesn't say anything. Arya stares at the screen for a moment longer, then silences the phone without answering. The tension hangs in the air once again.
Arya.
Bitterly. He's been calling non-stop. I don't even know what he wants anymore. Jack watches her, not sure whether to press her or leave her to process it on her own.
Jack.
You don't have to talk to him if you don't want to.
Arya.
Laughs softly, but with little humor. It's not about whether I want to talk to him or not. It's about what he expects from me. She finally meets his gaze, her eyes filled with an exhaustion that's both physical and emotional.
Arya.
Softer. It's always been about what he wants, not what I need. And I'm tired of it. The words feel like a confession, a release of something she's held onto for too long. Jack nods slowly, his eyes understanding, but there's still a heaviness in the air between them.
Jack.
Gently. Maybe you can start making choices for yourself. Not for him. Or anyone else. Just for you. Arya's chest tightens at his words, but something stirs inside her, something faint but real. The idea of freedom, of taking control of her own life, feels both terrifying and thrilling at the same time. She takes a deep breath, her hand hovering over her phone again, as if ready to reach out for something she's been avoiding for too long.
Arya.
Softly. What if I'm not strong enough?
Jack.
With quiet conviction. You are. You just haven't realized it yet. You've been carrying this weight for so long, it's hard to imagine life without it. But it's not too late to let it go. Arya looks at him, her expression uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, there's a flicker of hope in her eyes. She wants to believe him. She wants to believe that things can change. For a moment, she just sits there, listening to the sounds of the park, the distant laughter of children, the rustling of the leaves. Everything feels so far away, yet so close. And maybe, just maybe, she's ready to take the first step toward something real.
Arya.
Whispers to herself. Maybe I can.
Arya.
Softly. I'm not trying to buy it. I just want to understand. I can't help feeling like there's a way I could.
Jack.
Interrupting. Make it better. Fix things for me. You can't fix what's broken, Arya. Not without breaking yourself in the process. Arya takes a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The weight of Jack's words lingers in the air.
Arya.
I don't know how to make sense of all of this. Everything's so different now. I've had everything handed to me, and I feel like I don't even know what to do with it anymore. Jack takes a slow sip of his coffee, eyes flickering to the window, the city's chaos just beyond. He seems lost in thought for a moment.
Jack.
Quietly. You could start by not trying to fix me. Maybe you could just be here. That's enough. Arya shifts uncomfortably, her eyes searching his face for some hint of understanding. She struggles to hold onto the vulnerability she's trying to connect with.
Arya.
But you matter. You deserve more than this. Don't you think? Jack chuckles softly, a bitter edge to the sound.
Jack.
Deserve. I didn't ask for any of this, Arya. None of us do. Arya is taken aback, realizing how naive her words must sound to him.
Arya.
I'm sorry. I don't know how to help. Jack looks at her, his expression softening, though his eyes still carry the weight of years of hardship.
Jack.
Sometimes, just being present is more than enough. You don't need to carry the burden of fixing me. We've both got our own broken pieces. Arya's gaze lingers on Jack, her thoughts racing as she wonders what it would look like if she could just let things be, without the need to fix them. Slowly, she places her cup down and meets his eyes.
Arya.
Maybe I can learn to do that. Be here. For a moment, there's an unspoken understanding between them, a fragile bond forming in the space they share.
Jack.
Grinning slightly. That's all I'm asking for. Later, as they both stand to leave, Jack hesitates, glancing at Arya.
Jack.
You ever thought about how easy it is to hide behind a smile?
Arya.
Pauses, searching his face. I think I've done it more times than I care to admit. Jack nods, and they both exit the cafe into the cool air, the weight of the world still present, but somehow lighter between them.
Jack.
Pauses, thinking for a moment before responding. It's not something you can just learn overnight, Arya. The real struggles, they don't show up neatly. They hide in the spaces between the moments when you're not looking.
Arya.
Nods, trying to keep up. Then I'll look. I'll keep looking until I see them.
Jack.
Chuckles softly. It's not about looking all the time. It's about feeling it, living it. You don't understand until you feel it in your bones, like when everything you've worked for slips through your fingers. Or when you help someone, and they just disappear without a word.
Arya.
A small frown forming, she presses her lips together. So, the world's just full of these quiet, painful moments?
Jack.
His eyes soften as he meets her gaze. More than you'd think. But it's not all bad, either. You find a way to keep going. Sometimes you find something beautiful in the mess. It's a balance. That's the trick.
Arya.
Her voice low and thoughtful. And you found that balance?
Jack.
Slightly hesitates before answering. I don't know if I'd call it balance. But I keep moving forward. I try to learn from it all.
Arya.
Slightly amused, but still serious. And here I thought you had all the answers.
Jack.
Smirking. No one has all the answers. That's another part of it. You figure things out in bits and pieces. Sometimes it feels like you're always just trying to catch up.
Arya.
Turns her gaze back to the sunset, deep in thought. Maybe it's the chasing that's the important part.
Jack.
Nods slowly, his expression thoughtful. Maybe it is. Sometimes the only way to move forward is to keep running, even when you're not sure what's ahead.
Arya.
Quietly. Then I guess I'll start running.
Jack.
A small smile pulls at the corner of his mouth, his voice a little softer. That's the spirit. Just make sure you don't lose yourself in the chase.
Arya.
Grins. I won't. I've got you to remind me.
Jack.
Chuckles, looking at the sky. Yeah, I guess you do. The lights of the city twinkled below, casting a soft, golden glow through the expansive windows of the penthouse. Arya stood by the grand dining table, holding a glass of champagne, her laughter blending effortlessly with the sound of clinking glasses and elegant conversation. The guests were dressed in designer attire, their conversation flowing smoothly between mentions of exotic vacations, stock market wins, and exclusive art collections. It was a world Jack had never quite fit into. Jack stood by the window, feeling the cool glass against his palm as he stared out at the skyline. He adjusted his shirt collar, which felt too tight around his neck. The borrowed suit felt foreign on him, too crisp, too expensive. His mind raced, unsure if he should make an exit or find a way to blend in. A woman, impeccably dressed in a red velvet gown, approached him with a playful smile. "You must be the one Arya invited who's not in her usual circle," she said, her voice like silk. She glanced at his attire, then back at him, her smile widening. "I'm Monica, by the way. Tell me, what is it that you do?" Jack cleared his throat, nervously adjusting the cuffs on his sleeves. I'm between jobs at the moment." Monica raised an eyebrow but didn't push further. "Between jobs, you say? How interesting." She took a sip of her drink and swirled it delicately. "And I must say, Arya has quite the eclectic taste in friends. It's refreshing to meet someone new." Jack forced a smile. "Yeah, it's definitely refreshing." The conversation drifted away as Monica moved on to another guest, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching him. He felt like an outsider, a person in the wrong world, just for a night. Arya, radiant in a sleek black dress, approached with a grin. "Jack, you're blending in wonderfully," she said with a wink. "It's nice to see you finally getting out of that shell of yours." "Thanks, Arya," he replied, though his voice was thin with uncertainty. "It's different. But I'm managing." Before Arya could respond, a man in a sharp blue suit with an air of confidence stepped up. "Is this the elusive Jack everyone's been talking about?" he asked with a smirk, his tone almost patronizing. Jack turned toward the newcomer, forcing a casual expression. "That's me," he said. The man extended his hand. "I'm Alexander. I hear you're a man of mystery." His grip was firm, but the underlying condescension in his words wasn't lost on Jack. Monica, overhearing, stepped in with a smile. "Don't be too hard on him, Alexander. Not everyone's a part of our circle. He's here, and that counts for something." Jack awkwardly chuckled. "Yeah, I guess so." As the night wore on, Jack found himself more and more out of his element. He tried to engage in conversation, but his words often seemed too blunt, too ordinary compared to the polished banter of the others. Arya noticed his discomfort, but with a playful glint in her eye, she seemed to enjoy watching the interactions unfold. He stepped away from the group again, this time retreating to the corner of the balcony, where the cool night air felt like a relief. The city buzzed beneath him, a world full of people who seemed to move with purpose, while he stood frozen in place. He took a deep breath, looking out into the distance, wondering if he'd ever feel comfortable in a room like this. "You know, you don't have to stand out here alone," Arya's voice interrupted his thoughts. She was leaning against the balcony door, her arms crossed as she watched him thoughtfully. "I didn't think you'd be one for fancy dinners." Jack shrugged. "It's not exactly my scene, but you wanted me to come." He turned to face her, forcing a grin. "How's everything going in there?" Arya's eyes softened for a moment, a rare moment of sincerity creeping into her usually carefree demeanor. "It's fine. They're all just, I don't know, showing off." It's exhausting sometimes.
But you're real.
That's what makes you stand out. Jack glanced at her, surprised by her comment. For a moment, he saw the pressure that her world placed on her, the facade she had to keep up. Maybe he wasn't the only one feeling out of place. Maybe I'll stay a little longer, he said, offering a small smile. Arya smiled back, the glimmer of her usual playful self returning. Good. Let's show them how it's done. Together, they re-entered the penthouse, where the laughter continued and the chatter resumed. But this time, Jack didn't feel quite so alone. Maybe he didn't belong in their world, but for one night, he didn't have to pretend he did.